All right, you guys can go ahead and have a seat. Thanks, Jason. You look so handsome when you bring that up here. Yeah. Isn't he handsome? Thanks, James. I appreciate your response. I know who's going to give me some attention while I'm on stage. So, man, I'm excited to be with you guys. My name is Dave, and I've been coming here since we started, so just want to throw that out there. So can't break my combo. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm excited to be here with you guys. Usually I'm the guy up here that has no script, and they just let me run loose and host and welcome and do all those kind of things. And so they said, hey, we want you to have this amount of time of free reign. So I wrote a message, but I'm not going to do that message today. I'm going to talk about something else. Wouldn't that be scary if I did that? That's not what's happening. James is sweating a little bit. Like, hold on. I saw what you were going to talk about. Please don't do that. So we're not going to do that. But he mentioned we're going to talk about leaving a legacy. And so I want to start off talking about some words from a great philosopher who emerged onto the scene a little over 20 years ago, which sounds really old to me now. I know I'm only 34, but I'm like 20 years ago. That's nonsense. Some of y'all are like, 20 years, this, whatever. But 20 years ago, there was a philosopher that emerged on the scene. And these words that he let loose are actually words that you still hear today. And actually, you might even hear, depending on where you're driving or when you're driving, you might even hear them come on speakers. And so I want to share those words with you today. The words are, look, if you had one shot or one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted in one moment, would you capture it or just let it slip? Now, based on the laughter that I heard, most of you already know who that was. That was Eminem. He made that statement in the song Lose Yourself, which came out in 2002. Yikes. But as the kids say, it still slaps today. So the rest of the song goes on to provide this kind of semi-autobiographical account of his life and growing up in Detroit, in the slums, in the mobile homes, and not having a great life. But then all of a sudden, kind of like this overnight success and dealing with being a father in all of that and life and what that looks like and just this kind of mess. But he went from nobody, just some dude working at a grill and rapping here and there, to all of a sudden he's a household name. Now, for some of you, he may not have been a household name because you had the albums, but if you're like me and you grow up in certain households, he was a household name for many other reasons. But he was a household name, still is a household name. He's one of the greats today. In fact, many refer to him as the GOAT. And if you're too old to know what that stands for, it stands for greatest of all time, so I'll help you out. So you can talk like the cool kids, but he's the GOAT. And it was either this year or last year, I don't remember, he was in the Super Bowl halftime show, right, with some other rap legends. And I say legends because that's what they are, right? So we had Eminem, who would obviously the GOAT, but then you had Snoop Dogg was there, which we now have a great gif of him in that little like blue, where he's doing that thing. I don't know how to do it. I'm not going to do any more of that. But Snoop Dogg was there. You had 50 Cent there looking like a whole dollar bill. He was there. And you also had Dr. Dre, who kind of found Eminem, but all of them were in this show together, and they are the rap legends. They are some of those folks who are not mumble rappers. And if you're not sure what that is, find a 13-year-old who has a TikTok account, and they'll explain to you what a mumble rapper is as you delete TikTok off of their phone. But these guys, they have their names in lights. They're legendary. They've accomplished the American dream. And for many of us in this room, that inspires us, and that is something that we want to do, right? Wouldn't it be cool? You think of years down the road, and you have this great success, and your name is in lights, and maybe you're in the halftime show, or you're even playing at the Super Bowl, whatever it is, but we have this idea because of these guys who've created this legacy where their name is in lights and they're going to be remembered. And so we have this question of like, man, how are people going to remember me? What are they going to remember me for? And the thing is, all the stuff that I just explained is legendary, but it's not a legacy, at least not in the sense of what we're going to talk about today. And I think this is a more accurate depiction of what a legacy is according to God and according to Scripture. See, as a society, we have confused what legendary is, what those guys have done, what baseball Hall of Famers have done, and their name is on a stadium somewhere, and it's in this hall somewhere where you can go in there, and that's legendary, and that's a legacy, but it is legendary, but it's not a legacy. And the thing is, there might be somebody in this room that becomes legendary. And if so, remember me. But everyone in here, for sure, will leave a legacy. See, legacy, when it comes to how we view it as Christians, we want to view it with the original intent of that word, right? A legacy is used to describe an inheritance that we leave or that we inherit from somebody when they pass on. So, for example, grandma dies, it's very sad, but she has this amount of money that she's now passed on to you and your siblings and cousins or whatever. Or maybe it's not money, but she has physical possessions that she leaves to everyone, and that is the inheritance. That is her legacy that she has passed on. And when it comes to our lives, the truth is, while we may not have physical things to pass down, we do have something that we're going to pass on to those around us. And specifically when it comes to moms and dads in here, you're going to pass on something to your children. You will leave a legacy. And the question is not whether or not you're going to leave a legacy. The question is, what kind of a legacy am I going to leave? A lot of what I'm going to talk today about is directed towards the men of this church. And it applies to everybody, right? You may have to do a little bit of extra calculations and a little bit of extra math to figure out how does that exactly relate to me. I promise that it does. But I want to speak directly to the men because for most of us in here, we already know this, but right now, I think we're at a critical point in our culture and our society where men are in this decline. And not just a decline, but a catastrophic decline. And I think it has to do with legacies. I could stand up here and talk to you about all the stuff that you've probably heard on a podcast somewhere or seen on a reel somewhere about how fatherless homes generally lead to more people that end up not graduating. They end up in jail, committing more crimes. They end up in prison. And many times they often leave their own families and then so on and so forth, and it just keeps on going. And I could talk to you about all that, but you already know all of those things. And I think it has to do with this idea of a legacy and what's passed down to you. So if you take a moment and you think about your dad and you think about the legacy that he left, maybe you think, man, my dad was awesome. Like, I love how he treated my mom. I got to watch my dad take care of my mom and lift her up and just hold her in this high esteem. And the way he treated her, oh, man, that was so great. And, I take that into my own relationship now, and I'm just so thankful that he passed that on to me. I'm so grateful for how he showed me how to be a. Or maybe you think about your dad, and you think about somebody who, sometimes at his own expense, served people. He just wanted to help people. If he had the ability, and maybe sometimes he didn't even have the ability, but he tried anyway. He was there, and he was someone who jumped in and said, I just want to help people. I just want to be somebody that people can count on, and so that's what I'm going to do. And so now you've taken that on, and you're somebody who says, I just want to help people. I learned this from my dad, and so I want to be just like him in that regard. And it wasn't something that he specifically said, hey, you're going to do this, but you just saw and absorbed it. So you think about your dad, and that's awesome. But maybe for some of you, you think about your dad, and the legacy that he left you was, well, that's no dad at all. He didn't care about me. He left. He wasn't even there. I never knew my dad. Maybe you think about your dad, and maybe he was there, but he was there in name only. He wasn't present. And so what he taught you, whether he meant to or not, is work is the most important thing. What you do and how long you're there and climbing the ladder, that is what it's all about. And so now you carry that with you and you say, man, I got to work. I got to climb the corporate ladder. I got to be there and I'm going to put in hours and it's all for this better thing. And you tell yourself that, right? But that is what your dad has passed on to you. Or maybe for you, money is the most important thing. So it's kind of related to work, but money was your dad's God. And anything he could do to get more money, because more money would equal happiness, except that when he got more money, it didn't bring happiness. It just brought, well, I need to get even more money. And so now you carry that around with you as well. Maybe for you, your dad is somebody that carried this rage inside of him. And he carried it really well when he was around other people, but when he was at home, that rage exploded. And he took it out on you or your siblings or your mom or all of them. And so now you have this rage, and you kind of know where it comes from, but sometimes you tell yourself, I don't really know where this comes from, but I just have this thing inside of me, and I carry it around, and this is the weight that I carry now. And that is a result of the legacy that your dad knowingly or not, passed on to you. And I think it comes down to these two questions, because whether you like it or not, you're going to leave a legacy. And the two questions are, what do I want people to remember? What do I want them to repeat? And I want to look at some biblical examples about what I'm talking about and kind of help us set the tone for how we live our lives and how we can leave a legacy that's the kind of legacy that invites us to leave. In fact, if we call ourselves Christians, we're called to leave this kind of legacy. And to do that, I want to look at someone who was part of some extremely legendary events, but in the moment when it mattered, he decided to leave a legacy using the proper formula. So if you've been a part of a church at all, or you went to Bible school, or not Bible school, but the school, Bible school, like when you went as a kid and it was like the little thing, Sunday school, you got it, yeah, see, some of y'all were there, so you know, you helped me out. When you went to Sunday school, you heard about this guy named Moses, right? So Moses was this guy who at one point in his life, God calls him and says, hey, you're going to lead my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. And so he shows up and he's talking to Moses through a burning bush that's burning, but it's not burning. We don't have time to get into that. And then Moses is like, okay, cool. Goes to Pharaoh, who's the leader of Egypt, and says, hey, you're going to let my people go? And Pharaoh says, no. And so Moses calls down all these plagues on the people of Egypt. And so there's things like frogs and boils and all kinds of craziness that comes down. And finally, Pharaoh's like, hey, that's enough. I don't want any of this. Y'all can go. Go ahead and leave us now. And Moses says, cool, let's go. They are walking away from Egypt. They get to a point in the Red Sea. In the Red Sea, they're kind of stuck right there. But then at this time, Pharaoh also is like, I changed my mind. That was a lot of free labor, and so we could really use that. So they're chasing the people. Moses is like, word. Uses his staff, splits the Red Sea. This is a very condensed version, by the way. Splits the Red Sea. All the people walk across the Red Sea on dry land. They get across. Moses stops using his staff. All the Egyptians that were following them into the sea died, and now they're in the desert. And the Israelites do what they do best, which is make a lot of mistakes. And so they decide they're going to keep doing that, and God says, hey, y'all need to chill out for a while. You're going to spend 40 years in the desert. You're going to be stranded in there. And it's during this time that Moses also makes a few more mistakes. And God says, hey, Moses, I know I told you were going to go to the promised land. You're going to lead those people to the promised land. That's changed. You are no longer the person who's going to lead them into the promised land. In fact, you're not even going to see it. You're going to be dead. But your second in command, Joshua, he is going to lead those people into the promised land. And so it's at this moment, Moses could have said, all right, cool. So I can't argue with God. I've tried that before. It never works out in my favor. So I'm going to pull all these people together, and I'm going to let the Israelites know what's going on. And I'm going to say, hey, guys, just so you know, Joshua is going to be taking over. He's going to lead you into the promised land. Before that happens, I want to remind you guys about all the cool stuff that I did. Y'all remember when I told you about I talked to a bush that was on fire? I know none of y'all were there. It happened, I promise. Because also, remember that time that I called down like frogs and gnats? And also the Egyptians had like boils. Wasn't that hilarious? Like I played a part in that, right? You remember the Red Sea? How I basically like home runned the sea out of the way with my staff? You guys remember how cool that was? And he had every opportunity to do all that and talk about these legendary events that he was a part of. And he doesn't do that at all. Doesn't take the opportunity to talk about himself. Instead, he chooses at that point to leave a legacy that points back to God. And we see that in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is a book in the Bible. It's the fifth book if you're going in order. And Moses pulls all his people together at this moment, and he shows his people and us today in 2023 what it means to leave a legacy like God intended. And here's what it says, Deuteronomy 31, 7 through 8. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the presence of all Israel, be strong and courageous, for you must go with this people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors to give them, and you must divide it among them as their inheritance. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. So again, instead of pointing at himself first and saying, hey, look how great I am, look at all the things I did, and yeah, God kind of, he was there, right? He uses this formula needed to leave a legacy that means something, that impacts the people closest to him. And I've mentioned this idea of a formula a few times, and so I want to expand on that. And here's what I mean. The first thing that Moses does in this scenario, remember, he's just told he's not going into the promised land. He's not going to see it. Joshua's going to do there. The first thing he does is he asks the question, what is great about God in this moment? How is God great in this moment, in the here and now? And the answer is that, well, he's never left us. He's never forsaken us. He's been there with us the whole time. He didn't leave us yet. He didn't leave us in Israel. He hasn't left us now. He's not going to leave us ever. God keeps his promises. He told his people they would see the promised land, and God keeps his promises. So that is how God is great in this moment. That's the first thing that he asks himself. The second thing that he asks is, well, who are my people? Who are the people around me that I can point to God's greatness? And the very fact that he's the leader of all of the Israelites, he says, it's all of Israel. Those are my people. I'm leading all these people. I've been leading them for years. These are my people. I need to point them to the greatness of God. And so, as the leader of all the Israelites, Moses brings all of them together to make this announcement that, hey, it's not me anymore. It's Joshua. Joshua's your boy. He's not going to be the leader, and God is with them through this moment. And it's hundreds and thousands of people that he points them towards God in this moment. And that's the last question that he asks himself. How do I do that? How do I point people to God in this moment? And the verse tells us exactly how he did that. It says, Moses summoned Joshua, and in the presence of all Israel, he tells Joshua, be strong and courageous. Essentially, hey, everybody, this is a pivotal moment. I'm not doing the thing I thought I was going to do, and God is still great. Remember who God is. Remember who he's always been. Remember who he's going to be. So Moses shows that how to build a legacy looks like this. We look up first, we look out, and then lastly, we look in. Somebody who is a legend has the reverse one. They look at themselves first. What's great about me? Who can I tell? And maybe I'll throw some scraps to God. If you've ever watched an award show, you can see that exact thing happening all the time. Look at all the great stuff I did. Here's this award that I have. I'm going to show all of you people. Also, thank you, God, for, playing some kind of part in that. This is the reverse of that. How do I point people to God's greatness? Not me. Who are the people that need to know this? How do I point them to the greatness of God? And remember that a legacy is something that's passed down. So the question that we ask now is, well, did this work? Because this is Moses' farewell speech to his people. So do we know if this actually worked? Is this something that was followed up on? Joshua is his second in command, and he's passing the torch to Joshua. So does it work? And we can see whether or not it works as we fast forward several years. Now Joshua is leading all of the people. Moses is dead and buried. And they get to another point where there's some water. It's the River Jordan. And this river is at its fullest, right? So there's like regular river and then full river during the flooding season. So they get to it when it's at the fullest peak, one of the most impossible times to cross it. But to get to the promised land, they have to cross the river. And it's flowing, and it's full, and all the people are there, and they're like, well, we got to get our children across this river. We have to get all our possessions across this river. We have to get the women across this river. We have sick people. We have animals. How are we going to get the people across this river? And Joshua, as the leader of the people, steps up, and what does Joshua do? Well, he takes a page out of Moses' book, and here's what happens. Joshua 3:5. Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. Instead of jumping up and saying, hey guys, look, I'm Joshua. It's good. I'm going to take care of it. Do you guys remember that time that we walked around the city and literally the city walls fell because all we did was walk around and yell at it? Remember how I did that? Like, wasn't that cool? Instead, he points people to God. He says, what is great about God in this moment? Who are my people that need to be pointed towards that? And how do I play a part in pointing them towards the greatness of God? He looks up, looks out, and He looks inward. And he uses this fancy word here, consecrate, and tells his people, look, tomorrow God's going to step up and step in, and he's going to make sure that we're taken care of. That's who he is. That's who he's always been. That's who he was with Moses. That's who he is with me. That's who he's going to be with the next person to lead. And I don't know who that is right now, but God is great. That's who he was with Moses. That's who he is with me. But it's not about us. It's about God and his promise to take us where we need to be. And what happens? Sure enough, the next day, God shows up. There were some men who were holding the Ark of the Covenant, and they were given some instruction. The Ark of the Covenant is this fancy box that would have held the 10 Commandments. And so as they're standing, they walk up to the river. They stand in the river. And once that happens, the river stops flowing. It's immediately halted. And the Israelites are able to walk across dry land once again, just as they did with Moses. But now they're in the promised land. They have made their destination. Because God showed up. He did exactly what Moses said he would do. He did exactly what Joshua said he would do. And after all this happens, God tells Joshua, hey, get 12 men. I need you to get one dude from every tribe of Israel. Every single one. They're going to go to where those men are standing in that dry river. You're going to pick up a big stone, and you're going to have them all build this altar to God right here on the bank of this river. So the men do just that. And the reason that they're doing this is so that the Israelites have a memorialized picture of what happened at the river. So that every time they walk by it and they see it, they can say, remember how great God was, and remember how great God is. Those men that placed those stones there could then tell their tribes of how great God is every time they saw those stones. And for generations, as people would die off and their children would grow, their children could come and they could see those stones and they would say, hey, Dad, what's with those stones? Can you tell me about what's going on with those stones? What happened? And the men of those tribes could say, let me tell you of how great God is. Let me tell you our story of where we come from and how we got here and how it's all a result of how great God is. And so just like with those rocks, we need to be the same thing for our families and our people. Remember that word that Joshua used? Said it was a fancy word? Consecrate, right? He told him to consecrate yourself before God. Here's what that means. Dedicate your heart, mind, soul, and strength to God. So when the people of Israel are trying to figure out what's going to happen next, where do we go? How do we get across this? What's going to happen? Joshua says, hey, hold on. Wait. Remember the greatness of God. Remember to dedicate your very existence to him. God's greatness does not change based on our circumstances. Joshua uses this moment to remind his people the very lives, their very existence should point back to God, just as the rocks ended up serving as a reminder for him as well. So what does this have to do with you and I here in 2023? Why does this matter? Well, the very beginning of this, we talked about the fact that we're all going to leave a legacy. How we live, what we do, is going to leave a legacy. We're going to leave something to our people. And if we want to leave a godly legacy, then we have to use this same formula where we look up first. How is God great in this moment? And then we look out. Who are my people? Who are the people that need to know about God and his greatness in this moment? And how can I point them to his greatness? So what we have to do is we have to go back to the two questions that we mentioned earlier. What do I want people to remember? What do I want them to repeat? So when you look at your life, one of the first things that you have to figure out is, who are my people? Who are my people? Who are those people that are around me that I can point back to the greatness of God? And for those of you that are husbands or dads or both, your people is your family. Your family is the one who needs you to step up and point them towards God. Not towards yourself, but towards God. How is God great in this moment, the people that are closest to you, your wife and kids, those are the ones who need you to step up. And here's the question. They still stand. What do you want them to remember? And what do you want them to repeat? And to just really be real with you guys for a second, as men, we got to step up in this regard. We have to step up and be the people that God has called us to be. We need to lead our lives in a godly manner. We need to lead our families in a godly manner. We need to lead our communities in a godly manner, the way that He has called us to lead. And we have to step up and start doing that. And we have to make the change now if we aren't doing them. As men, that is our job. And if we aren't doing that, today's the day to make that change. See, I started this message referencing the beginning of Lose Yourself by Eminem, right? And in that intro, he talks about having one shot, one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted. Would you capture it or would you let it slip? Now, I don't know about everything you ever wanted, but here's what I can tell you. When it comes to leaving a legacy, you get one shot. You get one opportunity to leave a legacy. Now, here's what I'm not talking about. I'm not saying that you're not going to make mistakes. Lord knows I've made mistakes. I'm going to keep making mistakes. It's going to happen, okay? So I'm not talking about, well, I'm going to make mistakes. Of course you are. You're not perfect. That's expected. I'm also not talking about if you haven't been doing this so far that, well, all of a sudden it's too late. You can't make a change or do any of that. I'm not going to leave a legacy now, so I might as well keep doing what I'm doing. I'm not talking about that. That's the very point of what I'm saying this morning, is that you can change that. You can change it at any moment in time. But you have to make a decision. You get one shot at this life. Once your life is over, you are no longer in control of your legacy. But if you're still breathing, you're in control. The only person that can mess up your legacy is you. That's it. It's not anybody else's fault. You don't get to play the victim card. You are the one who gets to choose what your legacy will be. And you have to choose one or the other. And not choosing a godly legacy is choosing a not godly legacy. There is no non-choice in this matter. You are choosing one or the other. You get to make your legacy what it will be. And I can promise you this. No one ever has, is, or will go to their dad at their bedside when they're dying and say, "Hey, Dad, thanks so much for never being around when I was a kid. I'm so grateful that you were never there. I'm so honored that you chose to do whatever else it was than spend time at home with us. I was a kid then, and I didn't really understand it, but I understand it now. Thanks so much, Dad." No one's ever going to go to their dad when they're dying and say, "Hey, Dad, thanks so much for prioritizing money over everything else. I didn't really understand as a kid, but now I do the same thing with my family, so I'm really grateful for that. Hey, Dad, thanks so much for treating Mom just like a piece of garbage, like she's a piece of property. That was awesome to see as a kid. I want to let you know, I do the same thing with my wife. Hey, Dad, thanks so much for not being at any of my games, for leaving the family just in general. Hey, Dad, thanks for just carrying that rage around and being somebody that's angry all the time." No one's going to say that. If you've had the unfortunate chance to see your dad die, you didn't say that to him. If you're going through that right now, you're not saying that stuff to your dad. And one day, you're going to be laying in bed, on your deathbed, literally, and your kids are going to come to you. You get to choose what kind of legacy you get to leave. And so you get to choose what some of those conversations will look like then, but you get to choose it now. But you have to do something. You have to make a change. What do you want them to remember? What do you want them to repeat? So what needs to happen today? What needs to happen in this instant, today? Jeremy preached last week and said, what's next? I'm asking you the same thing. What's next? What needs to change today for you to step up, be the leader your family needs, to consecrate yourself? Remember, dedicate your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength to God. What needs to take place today so that you can point your people back to God? And listen, I'm not talking about, oh man, I got to go home. I got to do Bible studies with my kids every day. That's exhausting. You don't have to do that. You can. It's a good thing. If you want to do that, that's awesome. Please do it. I'm not talking about you have to do devotionals before everybody leaves for work and school in the morning. That's an exhausting morning for sure. But if you want to do that, go for it. I'm not going to push against that. What I'm talking about is how in every single moment, how do you point them back to God? And as dads, we get the opportunity to do that with how we live our lives. And so for some of us, it just means that we got to go home. Work will survive, or maybe it won't, and maybe you can do something else, but you get one shot with your kids. So maybe it means when you go home, you actually go home. Maybe you're thinking, well, I go home, I'm there. Are you there? Or are you there in name only? Because do all the screens gather your attention way easier than your kid? And it's way easier to put them in front of a screen than it is for you to actually engage with them. Turn your phone off. Put it down. I promise you the news will be there tomorrow. It'll be just as bad. I promise you Instagram will be there tomorrow, and it'll be just as bad. You're not missing anything by locking up your phone and putting it in a box in another room. But you are missing something if you're there and your kids are desperate for your attention, and they just want to see that they have value. And that they're loved. You get to choose that. You get to do that. And so maybe you're sitting there and you're thinking, you don't know my life. I've made some pretty bad mistakes. It's easy for you to stand on stage and say that stuff, but you don't know who I am. You don't know where I come from. Dave, that's really cool for you to say, but listen, I don't think I can do that. I don't know what I'm doing. If that's you right now, let me tell you this. Figure it out. None of us know what we're doing. But I'll tell you what I'm not doing. I'm not sitting around waiting for my kid to hopefully get it. I'm not sitting around letting my wife sit there and hope and pray that I'll be the godly man that she needs, right? I'm not sitting around just by the seat of my pants walking through life with an Eeyore lifestyle of, well, okay, whatever, I hope it I'm not doing that, okay? I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I'm not doing that. What I am doing is I'm engaged with the community of men who call me to be a better dad and a better husband, and I'm learning from them. A lot of them have life experience that I don't, so I'm learning from them, and I'm engaged with them to be better. I'm engaged in this community here, showing my daughter, hey, we're in church on Sundays. And it's not just about being in church on Sundays, because the church is the people, but it's about this is what we're called to do. There are people that need the hope that we have, and we have an opportunity to be here on Sundays to open up those doors and give them a message that says God loves you and has a way better plan for you than to just float around by the seat of your pants and hope things work out, because guess what? They won't. They won't. You can start anytime to change your legacy. Because here's the thing too, maybe you had a bad legacy passed down to you. That's no excuse to continue passing it on. None at all. And to use a really cliched term, you get to be the break in the chain. You don't have to continue that. You can. I hope and pray that you don't. You get to make a difference, and you can start anytime. But you have to start. You can start by getting involved here. There's other men in this room carrying a similar weight to you. Maybe not the same thing, but they've been there. They know. You can help create a vulnerable space with those men who can point to God together and say, hey, I know where you're at. I know you're not where you want to be. Neither am I. Let's do this together. Let's work on it. There's a whole board that we set up every Sunday that has, from one of our series that we did with the Thin Red Line, a bunch of signatures on there. Those are a bunch of men who said, I want to do this very thing. But they also said, I need help doing this very thing. I can't do it alone. We weren't created to be alone. We can't do this alone. I need help. Get involved. Start serving at the very least. Get to know some people in this church. Become leaders in this community right here, this very room. Become a leader just by jumping up and saying, I'm not going to sit on the sidelines anymore. I'm going to be a part of the action. There is no small role here at this church when it comes to seeing people meet Jesus and journey with him. Everything here is intentional. And it starts with an intentional choice of saying, I'm going to get in the game. I'm not going to sit in the dugout anymore. I'll tell you this too, we have an entire family ministry back there with a bunch of kids who come every Sunday and learn awesome stories about God and how to grow and be a godly person. The entire thing is ran by women. That's not a bad thing. So don't hear me and say, that's a terrible thing. No, that's awesome. I love it. It's great, and I'm super thankful for the women that run it. My wife is the leader of all of it, so I'm very thankful for all of that stuff back there. But how would it be if there was godly women and men investing in those kids? Because they need not just godly women examples in their life, they need godly men to show up and show them what it means. I have a daughter back there. I'm doing my damnedest to get her to a point where she knows that this is what a godly man looks like, and I can't do it by myself. I need help. And so I want her to be around as many godly men as she can be so that one day, when she's old enough and she decides to bring somebody home, she's bringing home somebody who's better than me. And whether she knows it or not, she's chosen somebody because she saw an example of me and other godly men in her life of how a man is supposed to lead his family and point them towards God. And that includes being the godly spouse that she deserves. There are other girls back there that need the same thing. There are little boys that need an example of a godly man. Hey, here's how you treat women. Here's how you lead your family. Here's how you lead your community. Here's how you treat your spouse. Here's how to be an awesome husband. Those little boys, they need that now. You can catch them when they're 18, but man, why? When you can do it now, why? Ample opportunities to step up and make the change today so that you can leave a legacy that points back to God, but you have to start. Just like Moses and Joshua pointed back to God and then set up a memorial of rocks that point back to the greatness of God, to when God showed up, you get to be a memorial that points back to God so that your great-great-great-great-grandchildren may say, look, I never met my great-great-great-great-grandparents, but I know that how they raised their kid and how their kid was raised by them and how their kids' kids raised their kids, I know that they were a pillar in their community, that they had a foundation on God, and that regardless of what they had going on in their lives, their life pointed back to Him. And so that legacy carries on through people that you may never meet this side of heaven, but you get to play a part in their life now. You get to be a pillar in your community, especially in your house. So step up and lead the way that you were called to lead. When I talk about dads, I mentioned earlier, when you think about your dad, I don't know what comes up. Maybe it's great, maybe it's not. But we get here every single Sunday and we celebrate a God who is described over and over in the Bible as somebody who is a perfect father. And that's our example that we have to go off of. Maybe we didn't have an earthly father, and if we did, he wasn't there. And if he was there, he wasn't great. I don't know. But we have the example in Scripture of what it means to be a father who chases after his children, who says, I love you so much, I want to bring you into a relationship with me. I want you to know what it means to live a life that I've called you to live, not just to float by and hope that things are great, and then 80 years later you look back and think, what a waste. But a God who says, I have a story for you. I have a plan for you. And I love you, first and foremost. And that God loves us so much that while we were still sinners, while we were separated from him, he came here in human format and died the death that we deserve just so that we could have a relationship with him. Not so we could live in heaven one day, but so that we could have a real relationship with him right now. And through that relationship, we can learn what it means to leave a legacy. So he sent Jesus, who lived a perfect life, and then died the death that we should die, but he died it in our place, and we get to celebrate that every single week. When you came in on your chairs, there were some little plastic cups, and these are the communion cups. On the top part, there's a little wafer, and then below that, there's a little bit of juice. And these two things represent the blood and the body of Jesus that was beaten and broken on the cross so that we could enter into a relationship with him. And we do this every single week, and here's what I don't want to happen. I don't want this to become something where you just chuck it back and that's it. And then toss the little cup to the side or whatever. I want this to be a moment where you actually take time to sit and reflect on that very sacrifice. The very God who created the universe, created you, has a plan for you and had you in mind when he sat on the cross, when he died on the cross. This is a moment to reflect on what that means and what you get to do with that. So I'm going to pray, and you can take it at any time, and then we'll have this one last song. But just remember that today's the day you get to make that change. Whether you're a husband or a dad or a wife or a grandma or whoever you are, you get to leave a legacy. But it's up to you what kind of legacy you want to leave. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for just who you are, for what you've done. God, thank you so much that you are a great God regardless of our circumstances. Thank you that you show up in the midst of our trials. Thank you that you get to, that you're the example that we need. Thank you for everything. And God, I just want to pray for the people that are in this room, and maybe they're not in this room, maybe they're watching online, I don't know. They feel like they're just at a point where it's too late for them. I pray that you would make your presence known to them, God, that you would say, it's not too late. I'm still looking for you. My arms are here. They're wide open. All you got to do is run into them. Just like that hug that each and every one of us are so desperately seeking from our physical, earthly dads, you have your arms wide open, ready to embrace us and welcome us into this relationship. And I pray that if there are some of us in here that are scared to take that step, that they would say it, that they'd vocalize it. They'd come to somebody and say, hey, look, I think that's me. I think I'm ready to have a relationship with God, but I don't know what to do, and I'm scared. I pray that you would make your presence known to them and give them the courage to come and talk to somebody. God, overall, I just pray that we would all step up and start to live a life that points back to you in each and every moment. We love you. It's your name we pray. Amen.